What we're seeing here is a response to what's gone on in the past number of days. We're in Los Angeles right now, but this is San Diego. As you can see, the crowds are amassing by the thousands, simply a response to what's been going on around the country. The unresolved resentment from George Floyd's murder, as it's now being looked at. The police have yet to fully acknowledge it in that light, but that's how the rest of the American public is viewing it. In Los Angeles today, tanks were rolled out, armored vehicles, National Guard flanked by the LAPD. The LAPD now has full-on military-grade equipment, remnants from the Iraq and Afghanistan war, so armored vehicles with machine guns. They have pointed guns at reporters, threatened to take their lives if covering certain events where the LAPD has been beating people. Many videos of this as evidence is out all over the web, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, it doesn't matter. This is just more examples of the conspicuous lack of, let's just say, governmental concern. And I'm not talking about California, I'm not talking about the mayors of each city, but the chief law enforcement officer of the United States is the president of the United States. This would be the moment where he would step forward and ask for calm and say it's immediately going to be handled and looked into, and people can stand down, that they're not being ignored, but in fact the opposite is happening. Which leads one to wonder, what is the end game here if you really want everything to erupt? Is it, in fact, to be able to hyper-militarize the police forces and crack down on a disobedient public that will continue to be disobedient, as 20 to 30 million people may never have jobs again? This is people getting unemployment, or many of whom are getting unemployment, doing this. So what happens in 3 months when that money runs out and they're hungry? You have to look at Los Angeles and other places where much of the looting were things like shoe stores. People need shoes, grocery stores, people need to eat. So the big hairy mastodon in the middle of the room is, what is actually going on here? It looks to be a haves and haves not issue. My saying this is not advocacy one way or the other. It's just talking about what is not being talked about. And Van Jones, who used to be in the Obama administration, I would mention others if they were in the Trump administration, but equally conspicuously missing are people of color in the Trump administration, whom I can quote. If there were some and they were saying something, I would quote them. Van Jones, who has occasional appearances on CNN, was asked briefly yesterday about his thoughts on this. And he said, many of us as black kids are taught by our parents to be articulate and to pull our pants up and to let them hang around our ankles when we walk out in public, and don't walk around with headphones on your head. Now, when he said that, he was pointing out it's not about sort of teaching good manners. It's so that you fit in, so that you're not a target of bigotry because you're not, fitting in. You're not mimicking the people who probably dislike you greatly. So they were more tools, directional tools of how to not get clobbered, of how to fit in without being molested by the cops, without being, driving while black. All of these things we're quite familiar with these days. For white kids, they'll tell you, maybe some, depending on what family you grew up with, also said, well, be articulate, education is important, et cetera, but that was not so you'd have to worry about the cops. It was so that you'd be able to get a really good job and make lots of money. Entirely different reason for the exact same information. You're seeing an aerial view right now over San Diego where thousands of people are demonstrating. And it's interesting, the more we go day after day with this kind of stuff going on, the more and more the argument of why people are doing it changes. The more and more people who are disgruntled, period, who feel like they've been screwed for the last 20 years, not enough money, not enough food, no health insurance. All of these layered arguments are now mounting in these protests and demonstration. I'd like to think that there would be some sort of movement that would cure these problems, but from what we see with the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States of America, POTUS, President of the United States, there will be no such thing. There will be only punishment for people who are misbehaving. These are considered misbehaving people. He's already threatened shoot to kill in a more lovely way. I think we're going to see different rhetoric. I talked to a friend in Germany, and they grew up studying the Nazis on purpose so that they would never fall prey to that again and never become that again. A friend of mine from Holland, who's in Germany, also talked to both of them last night. And he said, you were living in Berlin in 1932, where the cops are, killing people. There's unrest. They're rolling out tanks and military, and your cops are armed to the teeth, and, they're sweeping in. And the citizenship will be forced to obey. And then, that the African Americans are your version of Jews, or their version of Jews from history. Is it true? Is it not true? There's certainly interesting echoes. Godwin's law forbids us even to go there. But if you know anything about history, and I assume if you're listening to my voice, you do, you know how things happened. And you care enough to want to be informed and find these parallels, if there are any. It just, any other president in anybody's memory, even George W. Bush, who, companioned by swinging Dick Cheney, even they attempted to feign interest in things of this nature. But here we are with a generally silent White House watching the fun erupt, and it will be met harshly with fierce punishment. And this is the concern of many, certainly as they gather by the many, many more thousands, wondering what is next and thinking this is going to make a difference, flooding out into the streets. It may make some political leaders brave enough to step out and demand that things change and be fixed and cured. That is still yet to be seen. This is a still shot overhead in San Diego. We're going to cut away now and return when there's more to see, but just giving you a glimpse of how just south of here, Los Angeles, which is California's largest population base, San Diego, very well known for its military bases, borders Mexico, is now erupting the same way. So this is happening all over the country. You have to wonder how it is that everyone knows that they're all meant to be in a crowd on the street. And there's a lot of questions. Is it the far left? Is it the far right? Is it a combination of both? Lots of questions to be asked and lots of answers yet to come. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for hanging in, and we'll be back when